All the roll and go, where am I to go? Meet Johnny, where am I to go? For I'm a young and a sailor lad, and where am I to go?
Hello, and welcome to Where Am I to Go podcast. Today we are in Casper, Wyoming, and we stopped at the Fort Caspar Museum. I am here with Rick. He's going to take us on our tour and show us the cool things that happen to be here. Fort Caspar is a historic site of great significance as far as trails and a whole lot of things. I'm sure Rick will tell us all about it. And so let's get started. Welcome to Where Am I to Go, Rick?
All right. Well, thanks for having me.
Thanks for having me. I always appreciate it when somebody will let me do my podcast.
So what we've got, the advantage for us, we have a museum that covers central Wyoming history. So a number of different exhibits, but it's a lot more than just the fort. Then when you go outside from the museum onto the museum property, we have the historic site. We have the fort, we have a ferry crossing, and we have a bridge crossing. So we get the best of both worlds, a fun museum and a great historic site all in the same package.
So we can still cross the bridge?
No.
Oh, can we still ride the ferry?
You can't do that one either.
Dang! But at least we know where it's at.
But I can show you where it was, absolutely.
Okay, so when we first come in, we come into the bookstore area, we come into the front desk. What are the fees to get in here?
The fees vary seasonally. This time of year, adults are $4, seniors and teenagers are $3. Then we've got a smaller fee for 6 to 12-year-olds, and then 5 and under is free.
Dang, that price is just going to break somebody.
Yeah, it's really a good deal.
It is a good deal. I've been to a lot of museums that are a lot more expensive than that. And it looks, just from walking in, it looks like you've got a lot of stuff in here. So let's take a look around. As you come on in, you head off to the right, and you come on into the first gallery, and
okay, so as we walk into the first gallery, this particular space is a changing exhibit space. So we'll rotate stuff around in here. Right now, we're featuring Central Wyoming railroads.
What are some of the other things that you bring in here?
Well, the one that just finished, this one replaced, was an exhibit on the 11th Kansas Volunteer Cavalry, which was a unit that was stationed here, and we actually went down to Kansas and borrowed a bunch of the material from museums and private collectors down there. So for the year it was on exhibit here, it was the first time some of that stuff had been in Casper since 1865.
Oh, wow.
So it was a fun exhibit. So we've changed it for this year. It's Central Wyoming Railroads. So we focus on the Chicago Northwestern, Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy. Fremont, Elkhorn, and Missouri Valley was the first railroad into Casper in 1888. We had a north-south line that ran for a very short window. So anyway, this exhibit has a number of the items, things that you would have found that people used on the railroad, things, uniforms, equipment, tools.
Railroad workers' uniform. Carhartt. Was Carhartt the brand of the day?
Yeah, I mean, that's from one of our guys. In fact, a lot of this collection right here is borrowed from guys in Casper that actually worked with the railroads.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah, it's a fun exhibit. There's signage, a lot of text panels. Then as you look past that one, there's a small collection on our things we have related to American Indian out here in the West. And again, we'll change objects inside the cases and rotate things around.
Now, is that just this area that we're standing in, or is that
just this spot?
Just this spot.
As you go around.
Do you have any Railway Express Agency stuff in here? Are you familiar with Railway Express Agency?
Not really.
I happen to have a truck that I'm in the process of trying to put back together.
Oh, gotcha.
And so I've got a big intrigue with the Railway Express.
Yeah, and this particular one was curated with one of our volunteers and our curator of collections. So I actually didn't do a whole lot on this exhibit except build some of the mounts.
Okay.
Those folks did a lot of the research and put it all together for us.
Now, was Casper a big railroad center?
Well, I mean, the railroad, like I said, first one we get here, Fremont, Elkhorn, Missouri Valley is 1888, and that's when Casper gets started.
Wow. And
So,
was it because of
as
the railroad that Casper got started?
As it develops in Wyoming, a lot of the towns in Wyoming were because that's where the railroad was.
Right.
You know, early on, you've got the railroads across southern Wyoming, and that's how you start getting communities to develop as the transcontinental railroad even starts, you know, back then runs across. So even up into here, as the railroads expand, then so does development in the state and in the other communities.
Okay. And you've got several old lanterns. That says they were used for communications.
Yeah, signals.
Okay.
Train signals.
And some switches and some cream cans, some uniforms, a lot of different railroad memorabilia. You've got some dining ware from when they were probably hauling passengers.
Yeah, we do. There was passenger service was a big thing in Wyoming for a while. We've also got an exhibit over there in the corner, if you'll notice, on the worst train wreck in Wyoming.
Oh, really?
Which was the Coal Creek train wreck.
Okay, and tell me about the train wreck. Well, it looks like a passenger car was involved.
It was a passenger train leaving Casper on its way to Denver, and basically heavy rains caused a bridge to wash out.
Oh,
and
geez.
the train didn't know the bridge was gone and was unable to stop.
And several people...
There were a number of fatalities.
Wow. Wow, this is just an amazing picture. You've got a picture of probably 100 people standing on the shore, and this train is just a disaster. All tore apart and everything else right there in the river, it looks like.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a terrible wreck.
And what year did that happen? 1923. Wow. Okay. And just as a side note, Wyoming has, I think, one of the largest steam trains that's still running. Big Boy.
Down in Cheyenne.
Down in Cheyenne. I just heard that they're taking a cross-country trip this summer.
Yeah, they still run that, yeah.
That's pretty amazing.
So as you come around the corner from that, we have really sort of a timeline of central Wyoming history. So we'll start with the Paleo people, and you know, this particular exhibit features a Casper buffalo trap. That was about 10,000 years ago. The site's no longer there, but you see some of the bones that were recovered from it.
And is this the sand trap that that they would run the buffalo into,
Yeah,
and then the buffalo wouldn't be able to maneuver? So
yeah, that one wasn't one of the jumps that you hear about.
Right.
This particular one, they ran them into a parabolic dune and bogged them down in the sand. And
wow.
They were able to...
And you've got an old skull with horns. You've got some vertebrae. A nice pile of bones, actually, a pile of bones that I don't know that it is very common to see, as far as you see a lot of the skulls, but you don't see much of the vertebrae or the leg bones or any of those.
Yeah, that's actually from the Casper trap.
Wow. And then this here's, fragments from a mammoth. And that was at the Colby site, which is where?
Up by Worland.
Up by Worland, that's what I was thinking. Yes.
And then we've got shows you the chronology of the different lithics.
You've got some neat trade beads in here. And
lithic production.
And some arrowheads and knives and a lot of stone tools.
And as you move away from those, then you move into the early trail period. And for our exhibits here, we complement the Trail Center in that they do the big picture about the trail, and this exhibit focuses more on the specific aspects of it that were right here at our site. So we had the ferry crossing, bridge crossing. So we try to focus really specifically to our site and let them tell the larger story of the trails.
Okay. And then you've got a picture in here of the ferries and of the bridge. Wow, that bridge is really long.
Yeah, the bridge that was built here by Louis Guinard was 1,024 feet to clear the floodplain.
Oh, okay.
Now, one of the things you have to keep in mind and remember that the North Platte River that we see now is not the same river that they were dealing with during the immigration.
Right.
There's 5 dams upstream from Casper. There's more downstream, so you've got a regulated channel. Back then, free-flowing braided stream, he needed a 1,000-foot bridge to get across the floodplain.
That's a really cool picture. You've got an Indian encampment with a teepee sitting on the side of the bridge. You've got probably, it was a toll bridge, I'm guessing?
It was a toll bridge.
And what was the cost to get through?
Depended on how high the river was running.
Okay, supply and demand thing?
Pretty much. But on a high end, you could be looking at $5 to cross the bridge.
Oh, wow.
You know, translate into today's money, and that's quite a bit.
Okay, and the ferry, it ran, and what did it cost to run on the ferry?
The ferry was set up as $1.50.
Okay.
And the first one we had, our first ferry crossing was at our site, was established by Brigham Young in 1847 with the Pioneer Party.
Oh, really?
It was the way they decided it was better to get across the river than fording it. You know, prior to that, you just had to ford.
Okay, so did they own the ferry?
They owned and operated the ferry, and they set up a fee. Once they got their people across, they realized that this was an opportunity to generate some currency for the new settlement and assist other people that are traveling on the trail to safely get across the river. So it became a commercial business, and they operated starting off here in 1847. And then you ended up with competing ferries as well over the 6 years they ran until the first bridge was built down at the other end of town, which you'll see referenced as the Richard Bridge.
Okay.
It's French-Canadian, so it's our English version of pronouncing his name.
Right.
But Jean-Baptiste Richard was and then it becomes Richard, but the Richard Bridge was down in Evansville. And once the bridge goes in, that pretty much puts the ferries out of business because it's quicker and even better to cross than using the ferries.
Okay, now we may get into this a little bit later.
We'll do that as we do the historic site.
Okay. We stopped off down at the Sun Ranch south of Casper, and while we were there, they were talking about I think it's the Willie Party that came through in the winter, which was a Mormon party. Were they not running the ferries at that time? Was this pre-ferry or post-ferry?
Post-ferry.
Post-ferry, so they had to pay to cross the bridge.
And they would have been talking about Martin and the Willie,
right?
Which were the two handcart companies,
right?
That got started way too late, and they got caught in a blizzard out here,
right? And they ended up crossing the river with not going across the bridge, or they forded it.
Didn't use the bridge; they forded it,
which didn't do them any favors because of the cold.
Didn't help, no. Although the time of year they're crossing it in October. Keep in mind the river's way down.
Right.
Most of your immigration, particularly for California and Oregon, you want to be in this area the middle of June.
Right.
Well, we all know that that's as big as the river's going to get all year because of the snow melt coming out of the mountains.
Exactly. And we always have annual rainfall of extreme amounts about that time too, just to aggravate things.
But you get into the fall, there's not near as much water running.
Okay.
I mean, they still had to wait across, but that's how they crossed the river.
Okay, now I'm noticing in these pictures of the ferries that they have the pontoons going across the current. I've seen a lot of pictures where on the ferries the pontoons go with the current so that it doesn't drag the ferry down river when they're crossing.
It was anchored on both sides with a rope and pulley system.
Okay.
So they helped use the pulleys to lengthen one side, shorten the other, and then with your anchor rope, the current could help push you across.
Okay. Interesting.
But yeah, it didn't float down river because they had it anchored.
And it looks like it was only a one wagon at a time deal. Did they have to ford their animals across?
They still swam the livestock.
They still swam the livestock. Wow!
But it was a safe way to get your people and your wagon across the river.
Oh, that's cool. Those are nice pictures. The pictures that we're looking at. He's got 3 pictures here. One of the bridge that's a nice picture that's in about a 2x2 frame. But these other 2 of the ferries. One of them's probably a 4x4 and the other one's a 4x3, and beautiful pictures of a wagon and sitting on top of a ferry and the workers and everything else. It's nice stuff.
Yeah. And then as you transition into this area, we've got things related to the fort.
Okay.
And like I said, we have a museum about central Wyoming that has a fort, but we certainly have to, in the exhibits, cover some aspects of the fort history inside. half the year it's wintertime and only the museum's open, not the fort. So you can still pick up fort history as you go through the galleries.
Right. And you've got a nice telegraph display going on here. You've got a telephone pole or telegraph pole, I guess it would be.
That's an original telegraph pole.
Is it original?
Yeah.
And what year are we looking at with this?
Well, you get the connection 1861, which is really what drove the Pony Express out of business.
Was the telegraph.
Pony Express lasted 19 months through 1860 and into the fall of 61. But once the telegraph was completed, the Pony Express was done.
Okay.
And our particular site here was a Pony Express station. Then it becomes a telegraph station, and that's what brings the Army out, and it becomes a fort.
Okay.
So the Army gets here in the spring of 1862, and it's because of the telegraph. Keeping that communication line open to the West Coast. Just think about spring of 1862, Civil War's going on.
Yes.
They need troops back east, but they needed some guys out here in order to keep that communication to the West Coast so they knew what was happening, on the other side of the country. So you end up with some troops that are stationed along this telegraph line to make sure that it maintains operation.
And you've got a nice doctor's kit up here with the saws and the scalpels and knives and all of that kind of stuff. You've also got some Civil War memorabilia as far as buckles and shoulder, what do they call those? Epaulets?
Epaulets, yeah.
Epaulets and a canteen. And then you've got some radio equipment down here, the Morse code tappers. I don't know what their technical name is, but...
Key and sounder.
Key and sounder. Now I know, but see if I remember.
Yeah, there you go.
And then you've got a nice display of some military boots and guns, a couple of guns here, and then Caspar Collins. Is this one of his coats?
That's actually one of his vests, yes.
Very ornate. Is that all beadwork?
That's beadwork.
Okay, well, did he have natives do it, or?
Yeah, as far as we can tell, that's what happened.
And tell me a little bit about Caspar Collins.
He would have been familiar with some of the Lakota out here, and that's, from our understanding, from family lore, and that's where we got it from, was family, that he had that done for himself. Caspar Collins, he was a young lieutenant in the 11th Ohio Volunteer Cavalry, and that's who the town's named after. Casper Mountain's after him, Casper Creek. He was killed July 26, 1865, here in a fight that's called the Battle of Platte Bridge.
Okay, tell me a little bit about the Battle of Platte Bridge.
As a result of him getting killed, then the Casper, becomes...
Right.
And then they changed the name of the fort. Because the fort, when it started, when they first came out in 1862, it's Platte Bridge Station.
Okay.
We know of it now as Fort Caspar. It was in the fall of 1865, after he was killed, they changed the name of the fort.
Okay.
Using his first name, Caspar, because there was already Fort Collins.
Okay.
Down in Colorado.
Right.
That was named after his dad.
Oh, really?
So you couldn't have two Fort Collins, so it becomes Fort Caspar.
And then they changed his name from there, because that's spelled C-A-S-P-A-R, and the town of Casper is now C-A-S-P-E-R.
And the original fort was E-R.
Really?
Yeah,
was that a typo? Or?
It was a misspelling in the general orders. So when the museum comes about in 1936, by then we knew how he actually did spell his name. So the museum adopted the A-R spelling. Okay. But historically, the fort in the official military records was spelled with an E-R, but it was spelled wrong.
Okay. Now, does he haunt this area? I mean, I watched cartoons when I was a kid. There was always Caspar the Ghost.
Caspar the Friendly Ghost? Yeah.
Sorry for bringing him into the situation, but sometimes I go weird places.
So a bit more about, the fort history as we're going along here. This one talks about how when the fort closed in 1867, there was really nothing left of it. Whenever the Army closed it, they basically took all the material with them. Okay. And took it 45 miles east of here, and they built Fort Fetterman, which was the jump-off point for the Bozeman Trail at that point. Right. So they had decided after they built this fort up, they built it in the wrong spot. So they
and
just picked it up and moved it.
How many years was this running? 2 years,
well,
right?
Fort Caspar Plattbridge Station / then Fort Caspar from 1862 to 67. So
5 years.
5-year window.
Wow. Seems like a lot of putting something together to take it all apart.
Well, it was all about timing and when you needed it.
I guess. And then Fort Fetterman had their own issues.
Yeah. So you get a display here on the Battle of Plattbridge and the Battle of Red Buttes, which we were talking about. Caspar was killed at the morning battle, and Red Buttes was in the afternoon.
Okay, tell me about the battle, because I'm not familiar with the battle at Fort Caspar.
Okay, it's really going to start, go back into that winter, Sand Creek down in Colorado.
Okay.
The Sand Creek Massacre basically united tribes to get payback that summer, the summer of 1865. One of the goals here was to burn down the bridge. So we ended up with a couple of battles, the Battle of Plattbridge in the morning, and that comes about because the Army is aware that they have supply wagons that are west of the fort and coming this direction.
Okay.
So they order Caspar Collins and 20 troops to ride out, go meet the wagons, and escort them back to the fort. Well, they're ambushed very quickly after they cross the bridge. Caspar Collins and 4 troopers are killed, and the battle's over. That's the Battle of Plattbridge. It's a running fight back to the bridge. That afternoon, the wagons show up on the horizon. The Army fires the cannon to warn them. Tribes see them, same as the Army does, so they ride out to meet those wagons. That's called the Battle of Red Buttes.
Okay.
4.5 miles west of town.
Okay.
Or west of this site. It's actually at the edge of town.
And how many were killed at Red Buttes?
There would have been 22 soldiers killed.
And how about native casualties?
No ideas on the numbers of the native casualties.
On either battle?
On either battle. They won both of them, and they carried off their people. So really no idea. There certainly would have been casualties.
Right.
But no idea on the numbers, and they ended up winning both of them,
So we didn't want to count.
So we didn't know. and there were a lot of them. It was a mixture of Lakota, Cheyenne, Arapaho, all as a direct result of the Sand Creek Massacre.
Okay. And when was Custer's last stand?
That was in June 1876.
Okay, so that was 16 years after this. Well, 10 years after this.
Yeah, it would have been 11 after these fights.
Yeah, and now you've got lots of little artifacts here in display cases. Is this stuff that you've dug up from this particular site?
This particular case is all archaeological material recovered from our site.
Okay. And you've got some really kind of cool things in here. You've got an axe head. You've got a nice little pendant. Is that one that opens with a French-looking lady on it?
It used to have a lock in the back with a lock of brunette hair in it.
Oh, really?
That was recovered from actually a grave that was accidentally uncovered on our site.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we've had over the years, we've accidentally uncovered 9 graves on the site.
Really? And you know who they were? Or?
Mostly no.
Okay.
The last one we recovered, we think we know who it is. So we're actually having DNA testing done right now and see if we're right or not. If we're correct, then we'll be able to recover his remains and have him buried at the Oregon Trail Veterans Cemetery, probably.
Okay.
It'll be up to the surviving family to decide where they want to place him, but in discussions with them, that may be the location, if we're correct that that's who it is. Mm-hmm. And that's where the DNA is going to come in and let us know.
But you've got a pretty long span of potential people that died at this site, from the Oregon Trail, the Mormon Trail.
Yeah, I mean, even from trails. I mean, this guy we know was a soldier, and, from things recovered, we think we know who it might be. And I guess we'll find out here soon.
Cool. And you said you found a locket of hair inside of this.
Yeah, no idea who she was. Not a clue.
It's interesting because I have a real fascination with hair wreaths.
Oh yeah.
and hair, I mean, that was a big thing back in the day. If you were going cross country, you took a clip of your wife's hair or a clip of your husband's hair or whatever, just as a memorabilia if they weren't around. Or it's interesting the value that hair held as far as sentimental and and ancestral or whatever. It just intrigues the heck out of me.
Yeah, it sure used to.
So, okay.
So we go from this fort-related sort of a stretch of the gallery, we transition into a timeline of Natrona County and Caspar history.
Okay,
now
what is this a replica of?
Not a replica. That's an early Caspar fire alarm system.
A fire alarm system. Okay, now I need to try and describe this. This is going to be pretty tough. I'm assuming it sat on that marble block. And this thing has little rods that are probably an 1/8 inch that go all the way over the top, and then there's all kinds of gears, mechanisms, and other things made out of brass. How in the world did that work? Was it electric?
This is an electrical system, and you can see that there are 5 zones. And there were stations around the community, and this is a small community still at this time. Stations around the community where you could send the fire alarm, and depending on which zone is tricked, you would know about where the fire was at.
That is so cool. It's got so many parts. You can sit here and look at that for 10 minutes and not even begin to get how that thing worked. Wow, I like that.
Yeah, it's pretty fun.
It is.
And then, like I said, timeline as we get into here, we didn't use your traditional scale of timeline of every 10 years. We thought it would be fun to set this one up on boom and bust cycles.
Not that Wyoming has boom and bust cycles.
Everybody in Wyoming is familiar with boom and bust. So.
Still.
So that's how we set up our timeline, was breaking up the history into 100 years of boom and bust.
Cool. That is cool. And this bell? This is a big bell. It's probably 2.5 or 3 foot at the base and 18 inches at the top. It says Caspar, Wyoming Fire Alarm Bell, August 1st, 1896. So this must have sat on the fire hall for the volunteer fire department. Now, did you guys only have one fire department, or did you have a couple of competing fire departments? Because I know back in the day, they used to pay, the insurance would pay the first fire company on site.
We just had the one.
Just had the one.
Yeah.
Okay.
So then you get your timeline history explaining the boom and bust for any particular section. And then out of our collection, we've gathered artifacts that fall within that timeline. So you have a big case with some of the various objects that would have been available and around Caspar for each of your timeline, each of your windows within the timeline.
Okay, now you've got a glove here that's super large. What is the significance of that?
It's an advertising tool.
Oh, okay. And it's in your fire display.
It's in.
Or is this has more than just fire?
Yeah, it's just the timeline window for the 1908 to 1923 time period.
Okay, and you've got a horn, a cow horn, or whatever, hat rack. You've got the fire honor roll. You've got I'm assuming that's a
Caspar City Band uniform.
Isn't it amazing that they used to all have bands, all these little towns?
Yeah.
And now community is something that amazes me, because we don't have community like that anymore.
So yeah, nice collection of different stuff for the timelines.
And then you've got probably the biggest one-armed bandit I've ever seen. That thing's huge. Yeah, quite a bit of gambling in Caspar.
Well, that one was, from our records, confiscated at Powder River by the Sheriff's Department. But yeah, it's a Bally slot machine.
That is pretty neat. This one here must be the 50s, because you got Eisenhower, Life magazine. I guess that was before they merged, and Man's World, Shoot Off the Last Flare magazine. Some other brochures from here.
Bank bag.
A bank bag, yes. Then over here you've got, this is cool, a neon police sign. It says police, it's black in the background, looks like a mailbox that you'd stick on the side of your house. And then what is that thing? It's a dictating machine used at the Caspar Tribune Herald. That's an interesting looking thing. It has the cylinder like what the old Edison players used to have. Mm-hmm. And then you could record your own voice.
You'd record it, yeah.
From the 1930s. I didn't know that they had the ability to record their voices just like a cassette when we were kids. I don't know what, I guess now it's all
digital everything now.
Yeah. Then we come over to this display. This one's probably 60s. And everybody used to have a yard ruler that had advertisements and stuff, and now you don't even see the yard rulers anymore.
Yeah. And a lot of these pieces some of those are advertising tools. A lot of businesses used to release those advertising things to promote themselves, but also be a functional item.
Okay, and you've got several brochures in here, some belt buckles, some plates, Troopers, 1966 VF National Champions Drum and Bugle Corps coat. So along with the band, you had a drum and bugle corps.
Yeah, Troopers, Drum, and Bugle Corps. It's a big deal for us locally.
Are they still around?
Oh, they're still around.
Oh, they are?
Yeah.
And do they just hit parades or?
No, this Drum and Bugle Corps is a national competition.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
And what do they win? Just trophies and stuff, or?
Yeah, and be the best Drum and Bugle Corps.
That is cool. I've seen a couple, at old rendezvous or reenactments and stuff, but I didn't know that they were still doing that kind of stuff.
Oh yeah, it's a big deal, Drum and Bugle Corps.
Wow. And then this one here is, this must be 1940s because you've got some war rations in here and a certificate for rubber footwear. That must have been another one of the ration tickets.
Yeah, they rationed everything in World War II.
And Palms Quality Ice Cream. That's interesting because it's coming in a little box. It's the box is probably 8 inches by 4 inches by 2 inches, and that must have just held some ice cream.
Mm-hmm, yeah, it's a local Casper ice cream.
Oh, is it? Is a local ice creamery still going?
No.
Okay. Interesting.
And then you transition from the timeline, then we wanted to cover the oil and gas industry. Certainly a big deal for us here in Casper. So we've divided up the exhibit into a section that addresses the refineries and a simulated doghouse. And then as you walk out the door, you walk out into the oil field, and then we talk about the central Wyoming oil fields.
And now this is a real interesting piece of history to me too. We did a podcast at Midwest at Salt Creek Museum. I don't know if you've ever been up there. Mm-hmm, fantastic museum. For being in Midwest, which has a population of 300-400 people.
Yeah,
but at the time, there was 50,000 people. It was bigger than what Casper was. But all the refineries were here in Casper, correct?
Yeah, this was the refineries.
And then do you document the fire that took place? We're on our way.
We're on our way.
Sorry, I'm jumping ahead.
So here we are walking out into the oil field.
Okay.
And there's 7 tank fires I think you were talking about.
Yeah, that just is amazing. How long did that burn?
Oh, I don't.
It had to have burned for days or weeks.
Yeah, I don't remember how long. It was a pretty big catastrophe.
It happened June 17th, 1921, and it says the fires were visible night and day, and workers were able to save 60,000 barrels of oil before the fire melted pumping equipment. Though nobody lost their lives during the fire, 350,000 barrels of oil went up in smoke. That had to have been a hell of a fire.
Yeah, that would have been a big deal.
And then we've got Teapot Dome, and they highlight the Teapot Dome scandal, which was a major deal. Do you want to expound on Teapot Dome just a little bit, or?
Well, I mean, you could go through the panel here. This is an interesting scandal because they were selling off reserves, so it becomes, the naval reserve that we had, and then there was some shenanigans going on with, leasing deals and how things were being dealt with. And as you go through the panel, you can see it was quite the local, and for us local, but it became a national scandal.
Yes, and Teapot Dome was a national reserve whereas the Salt Creek, which is just right, I mean, they're next door to each other.
Right next to each other, yeah.
And Salt Creek was more commercial, right?
Yeah.
And was Sinclair involved in both of these, or was Sinclair heavily involved in
Well, the Teapot Dome one, he was charged with conspiracy to defraud the United States.
Right.
You know, and you're dealing with Albert Fall, Secretary of Interior. So, yeah, it was quite the scandal.
But was he involved in the Salt Creek aspect of it also?
I couldn't tell you. Don't remember offhand.
And Sinclair Oil Company is the one that you see with the green dinosaur in front,
yeah.
and they are still operating. In fact, we've got a town in Wyoming called Sinclair that still has the refinery going.
Yeah.
And then you've got a display of some oil drill bits. And here's some Salt Creek oil. That's oil from there, right?
All of those are oil.
That's amazing. Salt Creek is really, really dark. You got the Medicine Bow Field, which would be down more towards Laramie, and that's almost a maple syrup color.
Yeah, basically what this is going to show you is not all the oil that comes out of the ground is the same.
Right.
And not everybody knows that. So we're able to show here different kinds of oil that have been recovered locally. And then your map shows some of the other mineral resources that are available or still around in central Wyoming. And it's a push-button electronic map.
And you've got gold, iron, uranium, oil, asbestos, copper, coal, bentonite, trona, and the little button will light up where those deposits are, where those mines would be. Wow. This is a neat display.
Not much iron.
No. The iron was down by Atlantic City, right? Yeah.
So, yeah, some of the sources are lots of them. Some of them aren't.
See that?
Uranium. Dang, Wyoming's full of it, isn't it?
There's a lot. There's a lot. Then the last big theme you move into is agriculture in Wyoming. And the centerpiece of that is a sheep wagon that we have here. This particular sheep wagon is built here in Casper, 1901 at Schulte Hardware.
They built it at the hardware store?
So this is a local sheep wagon from here in Casper.
Did they manufacture commercially or just the small amount? Or I know like Studebaker was big and then converted into a car company, building wagons and carriages and stuff. But did these
guys would have been for ranches around here for the most part.
Just right local.
Yeah,
done right out of your local hardware store.
They're not manufacturing these to ship elsewhere, but this is where you're going to be using them. And, they were built other places too. Douglas built them. There were Lander had some. So, I mean, it's a local business.
Okay, and when we're talking about a sheep wagon, we're not talking about a wagon that you stick a bunch of sheep in. This is where the sheep herder lived. They're like a covered wagon, maybe a little bit more secure, I would say. They've got a wood burning stove in there. They've got a bed. It'd be like the original version of a motorhome.
It's an early RV.
Yep, yeah. An early RV. And the sheep herders would be out on the range for months at a time with the sheep owner or whatever bringing supplies every 2 or 3 days or maybe once a week. And after that, they were pretty much left on their own out on the prairie.
Yeah, and the interesting thing for people from out of state, we're still using these.
Oh, yeah.
They just have rubber tires and they're pulled in by a truck instead of the wooden wheels that we have and brought in by horses. So yeah, I mean it's still a practical use today.
And they're pretty much exactly the same. I mean, I don't know why they don't use trailers, but you see these things out on the prairie quite often. Spring and summer.
Yeah, it's very practical for staying in. Yeah, they're worth it.
Then you've got some brands over here and some cowbells.
Yeah,
and
some local brands,
curry combs,
local ranches kinds of stuff. And then a book on how to read brands.
Okay.
Which is something not a lot of people understand.
And this is interactive. So, yeah.
Yeah, it explains how to read the brands. And then this is a number of local or fairly popular brands, examples of all of those.
Cool. And there is a special way to read a brand, depending on how things are laying. Like if you have a 2 on its side, that's a lazy 2. If you have a bar coming between the 2, it could be like an A bar A, or just however it's lined out, but there is a certain language that goes with it.
There's a language that goes with them, and there's a lot of different kinds of brands, and it just tells you how to read those.
And my favorite brand is the one that has a 2 and then a 2 on its side and then a P afterwards for the Too Lazy 2P branch.
Yeah. And that's a fun one.
There you go. What is that one?
Monkey face.
Monkey face. And it looks like a monkey face. And then you've got the pitchfork. Devil's pitchfork even.
Yeah, there you're talking about your 2-bar.
2-bar.
So yeah, it's a language. It's fun.
And I don't really know it. I have my one little joke, and that's about it. And then back here, this is a cool display. This is a sheep display, and you've got lots of different sheep equipment, like a hand cranked sheep shearer. What's the mailbox?
It's a warmer.
Oh, for your
lambs.
For your lambs. Okay, this is like one of the large size mailboxes. I've never seen one of these. And when lambs are born, they're always lambing in April, March or April. The weather in Wyoming can be 90 degrees and 10 below at that point in time.
Yeah.
And so keeping the lambs warm is pretty important. And then you've got a couple of hand shears. You've got a sheep bell. Now this is a hot sheep brand. I didn't know that they hot branded.
Paint brand.
That's a paint brand. Okay.
They didn't hot brand.
Okay. Well, it's set up on iron and
Yeah, still.
Okay. Interesting.
So yeah, a number of different items related to that. And then a little bit.
Oh, and some castrating tools. Everybody needs a pair of those.
I think we finish up with a little bit on the North Platte River and the dams and power plants and things that we have.
Now, how many dams are on the North Platte?
I'd have to go back and count them now. We've got 5 upstream from Casper.
Okay.
And then you have to go downstream from there.
We just spent the night last night in our RV just outside of Pathfinder Reservoir, between Pathfinder and Alcova. And if you have not taken that trip, when you come on up to go to Pathfinder Dam and then take it on around into Alcova, that drive is absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah,
Fremont Canyon.
Fremont Canyon, yeah.
That drive was absolutely beautiful last night and this morning. I absolutely loved it. And then you've got a really nice picture of about 500 sheep and a sheep wagon. And it's a pretty nice sized picture. It's probably 8x4. And kind of shows, it's black and white, but it shows what it would look like with a sheep herder all by himself out tending all those sheep.
And then as you walk out of the gallery, here we are back in the hallway.
Okay.
The original hall we started in.
Right. And you've got several pictures in here. You've got a classroom, a multi-use room.
Yeah, the multi-use room we use is a rentable space. We also do public programming in it. And then for the most part, we do these traveling 2-dimensional exhibits along the walls. So the exhibit that is up right now is a collection of movie posters from movies that were filmed in Wyoming.
Oh, really?
And we change this room out about every 6 weeks.
It's kind of sad. Things like Longmire and some of those are filmed out of Wyoming, even though they're supposed to take place here in Wyoming. I think that Wyoming's not really conducive as far as funding and some of that. I think that they're trying to correct some of that to where more films are made here.
Well, and part of it is also when you're filming and what you need for the environment.
Right.
If you're filming in our dead of winter, that may not work for what you need.
Well,
sometimes it will, though.
Or even in the summer when you've got the winds the way that we sometimes have winds. But there's a whole... We got what, probably 30 different...
There's 30 of them.
30? That was a good guess. I'm not usually that good at guessing. You've got John Wayne with Hellfighters, Douglas Fairbanks, the man from Painted Post, the Thundering Herd, Warpaint, Big Trail, the Plainsman, Big Sky, Shane, Jubal.
Certainly not all of them, but this is a collection of movie posters we were able to get our hands on. It gives you a nice representative sample.
Yes.
Of some of the films that were here.
The Legend of Earl Durand. I've read that book, but I've never seen the movie. I didn't even know they had a movie. That's a pretty interesting story in and of itself.
Yeah, and a lot of them are Westerns.
Right.
But not everything is.
Lassie Come Home. Really? And the son of Lassie. This is pretty cool. Starship Troopers, Flicka. And then you move this display out how often?
About every 6 weeks we change this room.
Okay. And then you've got a nice big cannon over here. Do you ever fire that, or you just leave it sit in the corner?
We have not fired that one yet.
Yet. I take it that maybe that's in the planning?
There may be a time that we do that, but right now we have not. But it's a 12-pounder mountain howitzer, the same that would have been here whenever the fort was in operation.
Okay. But it's not original to the site?
No.
Okay.
It is not.
I would love to hear that thing go off.
Yeah, well, there's some groups here in the state that do have them, and we've had them come in for reenactments and shoot their cannon. And then as we walk out of that gallery, here we are walking to the back door, which leads you to the historic site.
Okay. Well, hopefully the wind isn't bothering us too bad. It looks like it's pretty calm today. So let's
see how we do.
Let's see how we do.
Doesn't look like it's blowing at all.
And that's really kind of a rarity for Caspar. Last night we wanted to climb Independence Rock and look at all the signatures up there, but the wind was blowing probably 25, 30 miles an hour down low, and I figured once we got up on top we wouldn't be able to stand.
So as you stand at the back door of the museum, you can see the 5 buildings that make up the original Platte Bridge Station and Fort Caspar up until the fall of 1865. After the fall of 65, the fort got considerably bigger than this, but this was what was rebuilt in 1936, and it was built from 1864 floor plans.
Okay.
So as far as, not being the original buildings, they're built from those 64 floor plans. The doors are the same, the windows in the same spot, fireplaces. It's what was here. Okay. Everything is identified, and as you go through them, they're all furnished just like they would have appeared in the summer of 1865.
So you've got them all furnished and everything else?
Yeah, all the way down to pencil and paper and eyeglasses.
Really?
It's really set up to look like the guys just walked out the door as you're walking in.
That is cool. Now, were the old foundations still here to where you knew exactly where to put them, or?
Yeah, we're in the original location.
Okay. You've got a big flagpole. That almost looks like a ship mast.
Yeah, that was the common style then.
Huh. You've got one like telephone pole size log going up, what, probably 20 feet, and then another one attached to it on the side.
That one's pretty close to 50 foot tall.
In total.
Yeah, and probably too short.
Okay. And then it's got a bunch of guy wires holding it, probably so the wind doesn't blow it over.
Yeah, and they would have had those then too.
Okay.
So yeah, that's actually a 1863 blueprint from the National Archives.
On how to build the flagpole.
Yeah.
Isn't that interesting? They kind of documented everything they did back then, though, didn't they?
Yeah.
Which way do we... Oh, okay.
Yeah, you've got... The buildings are on 3 sides of the Fort Parade Ground.
Okay, and this is a small parade ground compared to some of the other forts I've been to.
Yeah, well, this was a small post.
How many men were here?
This started off with about 20 guys when they first get out here.
Oh, okay.
Now, by the summer of 1865, where we were talking about those 2 battles, there would have been 110 guys stationed here, and a lot of them actually living in tents.
Oh, really? Okay, wall tents or range tents, or?
Yeah, it would have been wall tents, possibly Sibley tents.
Okay.
We don't have a record of exactly what tent they were using, but wall tents and Sibleys would have been available.
Right.
Sibleys were the round ones that you could set a stove in the center of them.
And and they would have stayed in those all winter long too. I can't even imagine how tough those guys were. I'm not anywhere near that tough.
So as you look at your first building here, this one is the sutler store.
Okay. And we come on in here. You got your store counter along with your cans of beans and peaches and some of that kind of stuff. You've got some dry goods, clothes. Now, would they have sold civilian type clothes or just military type clothes?
Now, this Sutler store, Sutler is a title. It's not the guy's name.
Okay.
This would have been a civilian who contracted with the Army to run a store at the post. So, no, he did not distribute military uniforms. This would have been stuff extra that the guys could have bought.
Okay.
And we actually do have records where one of the guys was riding home to his sister, talked about him and his buddies pooling their money together and coming over here to buy a few things to make a nice Christmas dinner for themselves.
Okay.
The Army diet was pretty horrible.
I would imagine.
So every once in a while you could treat yourself to something like this. And, keep in mind, you want to write a letter home, this is where you get your pencil and paper.
Right.
You want to have a cold beer, this is where you're going to get it. The Army doesn't provide that.
Okay.
And during the migration window, when the immigration's going through, they could also resupply or pick up things that they needed here. So this is just a general store at the fort, as opposed to the commissary, which we'll go to shortly, and that's that's the Army's warehouse.
Okay. Now this looks like a place where people gathered. You've got a table with a set of checkers set up on it, along with a uniform coat and hat. You've got another table set up with cards, and of course a candle in a windproof glass. What would you call it? Kind of a lantern.
It's a lantern, candle lantern.
Candle lantern. There you go. A gun sitting up next to another table where it looks like maybe they were eating. So this was a gathering place also for just hanging out after work, or
yeah, when you could afford it.
Did they charge you to sit at the table to play cards? Or maybe you could afford it after you played cards, depending on how your luck was. Okay, Now you've got some jars over here that look like old milk bottles, and they're full of fruit or other items. It looks like maybe raspberries and
fruit bottles. They're fruit jars.
And now, what did they put in those to keep the fruit preserved, or are they not in a liquid?
Those aren't obviously, and they're would have been sealed up in the jar, and that's what we're sort of simulating there with what we've got there. Same with the canned goods. I mean, everything that you're going to find when you come down here to the fort is a reproduction.
Right. But
it's the same kind of glass bottle. They would have had fruit jars like that. The cans and the can labeling, that's 1865.
Wow.
Stenciling on the barrels, and the various boxes, your boxes of pie fruit or stomach bitters. All of that, those stencilings are exactly the same stenciling that they would have had back in 1865.
Telegraph matches. That's an interesting combo. What is a telegraph match?
It's just a product name, Telegraph Matches.
Oh, okay. I'm still thinking of the telegraph and going, what in the world did they use matches for there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Like Brinkley and Reeves peaches, it's just a...
Right, I got it.
And then as you start around the compound, the next building you come to is the blacksmith shop.
And so they had a blacksmith on location. Actually, every place had a blacksmith on location.
Blacksmith was a pretty sought after trade if you could find somebody that could do it.
Wow, and you've got a nice forge, a rock forge, masonry forge with a set of bellows that are probably 5-6 foot and probably expanded 4 foot when they were pushing on them in order to get the coal hot enough to melt the iron. You've got some nails that look like they've been built, a couple of hoof picks. You've got the anvil, nice anvil. And
the anvil's original to here.
It's amazing how expensive anvils are nowadays. I've dabbled in the blacksmithing just enough to know that I can't make anything really well. But it's still fun to get the iron hot and beat on it.
Now, the next building you come to is currently the officers' quarters, laundry, and stable. However, this would have started off as the Pony Express station.
Oh, really?
Pony Express was gone when the Army got here. It becomes officers' quarters.
Okay, so they converted the Pony Express to officers' quarters.
Yeah, so the building would have been here.
Okay.
So what you're looking at in here is the commanding officer.
And you've got a bunk, you've got a trunk for clothes, you've got his saddle, the old McClellan saddle, a sword, a little bit of smoking tobacco. It looks like I think of it.
Shaving mug.
No, I'm looking at the part of the saddle.
Martingale.
Okay, martingale. You've got some wooden chairs that are really, really cool. Table. And it actually looks like it'd be pretty livable for a single person.
Yeah, and a big fireplace.
A big fireplace.
Another officer's quarters.
Okay, now was this part of the stage stop too, or was this added on to the stage stop?
No, this building.
The whole building. Okay, and this building is probably what, 45 feet long? I'm guessing, and about 15 foot wide?
Yeah, so this would have been the Pony Express station, stage for a short window. But those were all gone by the time the Army gets here.
Okay, and now at the stage stop, they would have kept horses here. Or not stage stop, at the Pony Express, they would have had extra horses. And
yeah, this one was a relay station, not a home station.
Okay,
so the rider would just change horses and keep moving. Home stations is where they would stop. So a particular rider didn't go from St. Joe to Sacramento.
Oh, no.
They went from home station to home station with a couple of relay stations in between.
And the relay stations, they would just get off their horse.
Switch horses and keep going.
And then keep going, and then the home station, that next rider would take off. So what did they rode like 50 or 60 miles in a stretch,
and it all depends on where you are, where your stations are spread out, how many you get to cover between your home stations. So there's some variation to it. But we're just one of the links along the trail. Now, interestingly enough for us, we're the northernmost station on the Pony Express Trail.
Oh, really?
Yeah, this one here in Casper is the northernmost station along the Pony Express Trail.
Okay. Now, we did a podcast at the Pony Express Museum in St. Joseph, Missouri. Yeah. Really an interesting place. And we probably covered some of the questions I asked you, but I'm going to ask them again just because.
Now this is set up as an infantry officers. The last one you looked at was cavalry officer.
Okay. And again, this has the bunk and the big fireplace and table. And
now, 1865, we had both infantry and cavalry here. It's another reason to furnish it to 1865 is we had different types of units, so we can show the different equipment.
Okay, and why did they have such a big building for just a Pony Express change station?
We had Pony Express and the stage.
Oh, okay, so the stage stopped here,
so
too.
This is both buildings.
Okay, and
this, as you're going to see around the corner here, the stables are attached to this too. So
really?
Part of the reason it's a big building is there's stables here.
Okay, so they had somebody living here all the time that took care of the stock and...
Yeah.
Okay.
And you'll see when we get around the corner. But here's another officer's quarters.
And is this one infantry or...
Cavalry.
Cavalry, okay. Wow, and again, basically set up the same other than there's two bunks in here. So these guys must have...
Junior officers.
There you go.
Laundry.
I'm glad you clarified that.
Yeah. There's the laundry.
Oh, and the laundry. Okay, now I'm going to ask a politically incorrect question, but did they have Chinese running the laundry here, or was this enlisted men?
It was just them.
Okay.
They did their own.
They did their own laundry.
For the time period we're looking at here, yeah, there were no laundresses that we can document being here, so the guys would have dealt with it themselves.
Okay, and in the laundry, it doesn't have a coin-op washing machine and dryer. This is old school with the galvanized tub and washboard and some Castile soap sitting on top of a couple of barrels and a rope to hang your clothes on, and I'm sure in the winter they were freeze-dried.
Probably weren't doing it. And then here you step into the stables.
Oh, okay. Wow. This is nice.
Yeah, it really is a nice stable.
It is. You've got about 10 stalls with a feeder in it. They're partitioned off to where you could put your horse in and grain them and feed them. and a little cart, an old cart for moving the hay or whatever it is you're feeding them around. Now, did they put up their own hay here, or how did they get their feed for the winter?
Transported in.
They transported it in. Wow. Because feeding through the winter in Wyoming is kind of a tough deal. You got to put up a lot of hay to keep it going. So they'd bring it in by wagon?
Yeah.
Really?
Everything came in, supplies. You got to set your guys up with food for the winter.
Right.
And then these guys would hunt and fish. They'd put in a garden, if they knew they were going to be somewhere for any length of time.
Right.
Sort of anything to offset that Army diet.
Wow. That's just amazing to me that they would import all of their food.
And then
for the horses, not for the men. I understand the men thing a little bit different, but.
And here's the commissary. So this is the Army warehouse. This is where they would have supplied the troops.
Okay, now are these actual hams hanging?
No.
Now in Fort Bridger, they have one that they claim's over 130 years old. I got to touch that thing, and it was just as soft as could be. I was amazed.
Yeah, those just give you the illusion of it.
But in here you've got vinegar, you've got salt, beans, coffee, pepper, sugar, potatoes, onions, ammunition, a lot of ammunition, soap, salt pork, 6 hanging hams. What was in the keg?
Now that one is set up probably vinegar.
Vinegar, okay. And they used vinegar a lot back in the day.
Yeah, vinegar would have been a way to prevent scurvy.
Oh, really? Okay, so they weren't limeys, they were vinegaries.
Yeah.
Vinaigrettes.
But it was a way to prevent scurvy.
Okay, now were there any females here at the fort?
Not for this time period, no.
Okay.
This is a real isolated outpost.
And how long were the men stationed here that were here?
The 11th Ohio guys were out here for 3 years.
And they didn't change out? I know that the company was maybe here for 3 years, but the same men were here for 3 years?
Yeah.
Boy, I'll bet they were excited about that.
Now, they would move between posts because you had these little forts strung all along the trail.
Right.
But basically, the 11th Ohio was out here for a little over 3 years.
Wow. And then here you've got your...
This is the cavalry barracks side.
Okay. And now, how come these beds are so large? They're full-size beds.
2 guys.
The 2 guys had to sleep in the same bed.
2 guys on the top, 2 guys in the bottom bunk.
Wow. I'll bet that created some problems.
Would have probably been nice in the winter, I guess.
And inside this barracks, you've got 3 sets of bunk beds. Like I said, full-size beds. You've got table with silverware and plates. You've got coffee mugs. Everything's tin. You've got the coffee brewing. What are the coffee pots? There we go. You've got some uniforms. You've got some guns, swords. It looks like a really nice big chimney and fireplace. A big stone. I'm wondering, did they have the ability to heat that stone to where it radiated the heat, or did everything just go right up the chimney to where if you weren't standing 5 feet away from it, you were cold?
Well, you're going to get some of that. But, keep in mind, these guys cut firewood all summer long to make sure they could keep those fires going all winter.
Right.
But like chimneys now, a lot of it's going to go up the chimney.
Yeah, they have what they call Russian or Finnish fireplaces, Swedish fireplaces that have the flues that do different angles that'll heat up that rock work and radiate it. I didn't know if maybe they'd come to something like that here or not.
And here we are in the mess hall.
And again, we have potatoes. Now, they imported all the potatoes and all that stuff too.
Yeah.
Wow. And some pretty large tables. So they all ate communally. Did they have a camp cook, or they traded that out?
For the early time period that we're looking at for here, these guys would have eaten in friend groups.
Okay.
You didn't have a company cook that would have taken care of everything for everybody. And once you get into the bigger fort, then that starts to happen.
Okay.
But, keep in mind, when this gets started, it's just a handful of guys out here. And they just would have eaten with their buddies.
Okay, and then we got another, this here's
This is the infantry barracks.
Infantry side. Okay, and it's basically set up the same other than the dining and kitchen area is on the other side.
Yeah. So infantry and cavalry separated.
Now, why would they do that? Just because they're two different branches, or?
Yeah. Different parts of the Army.
Okay.
With different duties.
And what were the difference in duties?
Well, I mean, there's a whole manual list. The easy way to explain it is the infantry guys walked everywhere, cavalry rode.
Okay.
So the cavalry's dealing with their horses and whatever stuff they have to do as far as taking care of the telegraph. The infantry guys are walking in whatever they have to do to take care of their equipment and the fort. So it's the difference of riding and walking.
Okay.
That's the easy explanation. This is why they're here. We've walked into the telegraph storeroom. So repairing the telegraph and keeping it in working order was a full-time job.
Okay.
So they're out here continually making repairs to and making sure it stays open. And your telegraph, you can't, again on the telegraph, you can't set in Missouri and call California. It goes station to station to station to station to station.
Wow, I did not realize that.
So Deer Creek Station, would telegraph Platte Bridge Station. I have a message. Platte Bridge would go, okay, send it. Then Platte Bridge would turn around to Sweetwater Station and say, I have a message. Sweetwater would go, okay, send it. If you don't hear from them, there's a problem. And you put together your squad of guys and you start down the telegraph line until you can figure out why it's not working.
Did they ever get the message right by the time it got to where it was supposed to go?
You hope so.
I'm going to say, because I've played that little game in different deals where, you tell somebody this at one end, and by the time you get to the other, it's completely messed up or totally different message.
Yeah, but out here, about 60 miles is as far as you could send a telegraph signal. So you have to have those stations along the way to take that message and then shoot it on to the next one. So it was all a series of telegraph stations, and these guys were keeping it operating.
And they've got an axe in here, they've got a shovel, they've got a couple of saws, a nice crosscut saw, pick. So they must have been digging poles and all that also.
Yeah, placing poles when you could.
Now, are these wood insulators?
It's called a wooden shield that sits over the top of the insulator.
Over the top of the glass insulator?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then it's all run with a chemical reaction battery. So when your battery runs out, you just remix all your chemicals and you've got a new battery again.
And that's the way they recharge.
So you would have had new supplies out here in order to, when your battery is used up, then you just build you a new battery in these jars here.
Wow. That is interesting. I didn't realize that they would have to mix the chemicals and add it to the plates in order to.
Yeah.
I guess I didn't even think about how they would have recharged the telegraph batteries.
And then here's your telegraph office. So you would have had a guy in here all the time.
And did they change out? I see that there's a bed in here, so you must have had two guys in here.
Yeah,
one guy sitting at the desk and the other guy
sleeping.
You
would rotate. Well, you'd just rotate jobs, This guy'd be in here for so many hours of what he's got to do, and then if you've got another telegraph operator, then you switch out. But yeah, you would have had to have had a telegraph operator in here full time.
Wow.
Because you don't know when the signal's coming.
Right. Or when the last catastrophe happened and you had to get going.
And as we look off to the north here, the north end of the parade ground, this is where that bridge I was telling you about was located.
Okay.
I've got this little section here built to show you what the bridge looked like. But again, the original bridge was 1,024 feet.
That's a pretty long bridge, really.
It was big.
It's amazing that the river had that much fluctuation, but then again, you see it quite often. And did the river move as much at that time as a lot of the rivers in Wyoming do?
Well, back then it was all a matter of, snow melt and all the water running big, or then it'd, fall in the winter, it'd flow down to hardly anything moving.
Right. But I know, like in the Missouri River, we went to a
where you're changing
museum and they'd found a ship that had sunk.
the Bertrand.
The Arabian.
Arabia, Kansas City then.
Have you been to that museum?
I've been to both of them, the Bertrand and then the Arabia.
Okay, now I haven't heard of the Bertrand, but we went to the Arabian Museum. Fantastic place, but they found that a half mile inland from where the channel is running right now.
Where the channel runs now.
And I didn't know if the North Platte.
Well, for right here, the north bank opposite of us is still in the same spot.
Okay.
It's this south bank that has changed because of the dam controls, so we no longer have a river here. But what we're looking at is the river bottom.
Okay.
And, for comparison, I wish we had a visual, but you can see where that traffic's running.
Right.
That's the other end of the bridge.
At about 300 yards away.
Yeah, a little longer than that, actually.
Yeah, because it's 1,000 feet.
Yeah. So, where you see the traffic, that's the other end of the bridge.
Wow. That was a pretty long bridge.
Oh, it was a huge undertaking.
And then that little house that we were looking at sat right here off to the left-hand side for them to collect the toll, right? In one of the pictures.
That would have been up there.
Oh, it would have been up there.
This bridge would have been started back here a little farther.
Okay.
Like I said, I've just got this representative sample to show you what the bridge looked like. And it's on line with where the bridge was.
Okay. And there's a tree growing up right in the middle of the bridge right now.
Yeah, several cottonwoods as you go farther down. And then off to our right, that's the example of the ferry.
This is really cool to see this because you've got the ferry with just cottonwood logs for the pontoons and then decking on top and enough room. That's pretty much actual size for a buckboard wagon.
Yeah, the wagons vary depending on what you had access to.
Right.
When you're watching the movies, everybody's in a Conestoga.
Right.
Okay. When you were traveling west back then, to have everybody in a Conestoga would be the same as us driving down the highway now and everybody's in a Lincoln Navigator.
Right.
They're not. You got the wagon that you could get.
Yeah, I'm sure that,
So
or Ford.
There was some variety.
And then they lashed them down with ropes to keep it from rolling back and forth, took the tongue off, put the tongue underneath. I guess they'd have to do that, otherwise your tongue was dragging in the water.
Yeah, then you get it across, unload it, bring your ferry back, load up another wagon. Now, it was time consuming, the ferry,
sure.
Which is why the bridges put the ferries out of business as soon as the bridges went in. But as an example, we've got a copy of a diary up at the museum where a woman complained about she had to camp here for a week waiting for her turn to cross on the ferry.
You got to be joking. Okay, now this bridge, I'm looking at it. Did they lead the horses across? Did they pull the wagons across?
No, they just drove them right across.
Because the way you've got the cross logs and then you've got your tracks where the horses, that distance doesn't look like it's the right distance for your tongue and the horses to be on the
it's
on the
right.
planks. It is. Okay.
Yeah, and also keep in mind, your immigration west, when you're traveling, Oregon, California, wherever, horses aren't pulling your wagons.
No, they're not.
It's oxen.
I was about ready to correct myself, but I didn't get it done yet.
Yeah, would have been oxen.
Yeah, or mules. I think that they use quite a few mules.
If you could settle, if you had to settle, you'd settle for mules, but oxen's was preferred.
They may have been slower, but they're a lot tougher animal. Also, not nearly as picky on what they eat.
So, that's the tour of the site.
This is awesome. This is really a neat facility. You could spend quite a bit of time here just looking at all the different artifacts and reading the different things that are going on.
Yeah, and we see people every summer and into the spring and the fall. We'll get people from all 50 states. We'll get somewhere in the neighborhood of 40 to 55 different countries.
Oh, wow.
Every year.
Every year. And do you guys have a website where people can look at some of this? Or
We do.
What is the website?
FortCasparWyoming.com.
Oh, okay.
Spell it all out.
Well, that's good.
But yeah, and there's a lot of historical resources on the site. There's a activities page, so you know what kinds of upcoming events we've got going. It's quite a bit of good information on that one.
What kind of events do you have here every year?
Well, we do Spring and the fall, we do school tours. In the summer, we have an event called Caspar Collins Day, which is a living history and history-themed event with craft fairs and food booths and a lot of stuff.
People dressed in period costume and stuff.
And we do fall and the spring. We do ghost tours
With Caspar?
here in
Sorry to bring him up again.
And then first weekend in December, that Saturday, we do a Christmas candlelight tour. So you get to see the fort lit up at night with the candle lanterns going.
Oh, that'd be awesome.
Most everybody sees it, in the daytime and the summer. But to see it in the dead of winter with candle lanterns going gives you, at least for a glimpse, what it might have been like for these guys living out here.
Wow. Okay, now your ghost tours. Is this place supposedly haunted?
It is.
It is. Okay. And just the fort area, or the whole site, or
Whole site.
Okay. And what kind of paranormal have you had?
So the tours, just like you see on the TV shows.
Right.
You've got all the different paranormal equipment. There's not people, dressed up and jumping out at you like a haunted house. You're actually doing an investigation.
Okay.
And there's been a lot of activity over the years. Stuff moving and orbs, electronic voices. A couple times there's been apparitions photographed.
Really?
So, a lot of different activity.
That's interesting.
It's a real popular event.
Yeah, they seem to be. There's a lot of places that have the haunted tours. We did a podcast at the Glore Psychiatric Museum in St. Joseph, Missouri. And dang, that, if any place is haunted, that has to be. But she was saying there's all kinds of stuff happens there.
Yeah, and this property, during the migration period, you would have seen hundreds of thousands passing somewhere around here.
Right. Well, and then like you said, you've discovered nine graves.
9 graves on the property so far.
Wow.
2 of them pretty clearly are probably immigrants. 6 of them were definitely soldiers. And then the one woman, probably an immigrant.
Okay, so you didn't have records of who the 6 soldiers were that died here? They didn't keep those kind of records?
No idea who it is. And for our time period here, they were burying them in a lot of places.
Right.
They were burying them across the river to the north, across the river to the west, on this property in some places. There was some graves washed out a few years ago on down 13th Street at a bend in the river.
Oh, so wow.
We were buried in a lot of different places. 6 of them on our property were right there near the entrance as you pull into the property.
Oh, okay. Huh.
They're still buried there. That's actually an official Casper cemetery.
Oh, really?
So they're still buried there.
But you don't have any idea who they are?
No idea who they are.
Now, were those all military, or you don't know?
5 of the 6 were military. The other one was that woman with that locket.
Okay. Wow. So the military must have just had a place that they planted people.
The guy that we think we know who it was definitely Army, and he's over there where the playground was.
Well, that's clear on the opposite side.
Yeah, completely different from that spot.
Okay. Well,
So-
I guess they didn't have any organization as to where they were burying them.
Those ones that washed out and down the river, those were military.
Oh, really? Huh. Were they buried in military garb, or how did you know they were military?
There was enough left that you could tell.
Wow. Well, Rick, this has been fascinating and very educational.
I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Well, I'm glad you spent your time with me. It's always nice to find people that are willing to talk to me.
And then here we are, back at the museum.
There we go.
We've landed back where we started.
Okay. Well, I appreciate your time, and I usually finish out my podcast by saying the world is full of wonder. People need to get out and explore, see history. I mean, here at the museum, we're actually seeing history with the ferry, with the bridge, with the fort. You can get a feel a little bit about how people lived and what was going on at the time. And everybody have an absolutely wonder-filled day. Okay, if you want to see more pictures of different podcasts that we've done, including this one, They will be posted at Where Am I to Go podcast on Facebook. We also can be contacted at whereamitogo podcast@gmail.com. And we have a website at whereamitogo.com. And you can link to us on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Thank you for taking your time and listening to us today.
All the roll and go, where am I to go? Meet Johnny, where am I to go? For I'm a young and a sailor lad, and where am I to go?